Hello, everyone. Glad to see you all. Hope you're all doing okay. Hi, Charlene. Hi, Dungeon Matron. Hi, Campaign Terrain. Good to see you, Cross. Uh, Cross from Campaign Terrain is saying that he's known you for 27 years and says hi.
Who?
Cross. Crosby, if I remember correctly. Okay, Cross, maybe you can give some more context there. Hi, Kim from Quizboard Terrain. Let's see who was. Oh, Mia Geeked. Hi. Earthman Brick. Good to see you. And the Scatter Train. Hope you're all doing great.
I have to open up the chat, see what's going on over there. So. I usually don't because it's like my ADD kicks in. I'll let you tell me what's best. Like, I'll be reading it and I'll like want to comment like, hold on, that guy.
Okay, everybody. So our guest today is Seth Skorkowsky, author, game master, YouTuber, owner of Epic T-shirts. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Actually, I'm just wearing a straight black T-shirt today, so worst time to get that intro.
Okay, so as we were chatting before the stream, I thought we'd start by letting you introduce yourself and telling us how you got into gaming.
Okay. Well, I'm Seth Skorkowsky, author, game master, YouTuber, owner of shirts, and I got into gaming. Well, let me rewind. During the 1980s, we had the Satanic Panic in the U.S., which was a massive thing that was all over the news. So when I was a kid, I believed what Oprah and Donahue in 60 Minutes told me, that it was this evil game that would drive you insane. And there was like different movies about it. Everybody always talks about the one with Tom Hanks, but like there was one with Gwyneth Paltrow, where like these kids kill their parents to get the money to play D&D and all sorts of stuff. So it was like the bad boy scary person game. So of course I wanted to know what the heck that was about. So I thought it had been made illegal. Like I thought they outlawed this awful game because I believed whatever.
I think that was a persistent rumor for a long time.
Yeah, and you're 9, and it's like you're an idiot because you're 9. And so when I was 12 and I was at school, I got one of those little magazines that they send to schools to just market crap to kids, and one of them had the black box edition of just Dungeons and Dragons, and it was like it was being released. And it's like it's back, Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, oh my god, it's no longer illegal. I finally can find out what the hell this is about. So I asked my mom for it. I got it for my 13th birthday, and it came with like a little adventure you could like dungeon master yourself through. And I ended up, I was like at a Boy Scout meeting a couple of weeks later, and I was telling my friend all about this cool game. And this kid that I never really spent any time with, like some little know-it-all brat, is like, well, that's not how elves work. And he starts talking about D&D. And then I find out that he plays advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which I mean, like, oh, I'm playing the pedestrian version. Like, I didn't know this. And his dad had been playing since the 70s and was willing to run a bunch of us. So this kid quickly becomes one of my best friends in the entire world. It's like, oh, we are about to be fast friends. So I ended up hooking up with them within like 3 months, and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And second edition had just released, so our dungeon master was like, I'm not buying all new books, because he had like a big box of books. So it was like, go to the used bookstores, go to garage sales, buy first edition stuff. So we did. And because second edition came out, there was a ton of used first edition stuff. So we played that starting when I was 13. And we played that pretty much until I was almost done with high school. I think by my senior year, I was like, the group had like, everybody had so many activities that I think we played like once, twice that whole year. I discovered girls in punk rock, but then college happened and I went right back to D&D. So that's my story.
Dungeon Maiden is saying, I love D&D that Dungeons and Dragons is the focus of the Satanic Panic, but Call of Cthulhu is weird but okay.
I heard about Call of Cthulhu from like the guy in our groups of like circles of friends. and it was all in like the punk scene and on like all of this. Who was like kind of like the bad boy, a little bit older than us. And he was like always into like the weird stuff, like dressed like the Crow with the white makeup, sort of thing, like into the weird stuff. He told me about Call of Cthulhu and all that, but he was a weirdo, and I didn't understand what he was talking about, and like it took me about 15 years,
Whoa.
and he and I are still friends. So I'm like, hey, Aaron, I checked out Call of Cthulhu. You were right. You were right. This is my jam. But he told me about that in like 2002 or 2001. I mean, years before I ever played it. And I was like, that sounds strange. It doesn't have dwarves, so.
Okay, and Quest Bortrain is saying, Seth, you are one of the biggest reasons I ventured into being a keeper.
Oh, well, good. We need more of them. I hope you're enjoying it. Call of Cthulhu was one of those few games that might be the first game I ever picked up where when I read it, it was like this, like, holy crap, where has this been my whole life? The truth was my buddy Aaron told me about it like almost 20 years before, but I wasn't paying attention. But but learning how to be a keeper was like, this is the best, because it's mystery games. My mom made me watch all the old mystery shows growing up, so Murder She Wrote, Miss Marple, and all that. So like I grew up always loving murder mysteries and supernatural, and it's like let's just put them together in a cool backdrop, and so it clicked immediately.
Okay, Campaign Terrain, that's Cross is saying, that's when I met Seth, was at TJC, and he also hung out at the bookstore my then wife worked in. It was East Texas, so all the weirdos flocked together.
It's what's weird is like, so in that like that Barnes and Noble, it's East Texas town. They had a huge role playing section for it, where it's like it was two full bookshelves, and one was D&D, and it was because there were so many settings. So there's like Ravenloft, Planescape, Dark Sun, and Forgotten Realms, just all of these settings. And then the other full bookshelf was like everything else. Like the top shelf was White Wolf, like Vampire, Werewolf, etc. And then there was like 3-4 shelves of everything else. And now, if I go to a Barnes Noble bookstore, even in like much larger cities, at most is one shelf, and it's almost only Dungeons and Dragons. There might be some Pathfinder, there might be some Starfinder, but not guaranteed. It's mostly just going to be D&D. And so it's like, man, used to you could just walk in and there were so many games. Like you could walk in and there's like the Tank Girl role playing game. You're like, what the hell's the Tank Girl role playing game? And read that. And it was just, they were just right there. And now you have to search online, but with that online, you can get in your little bubble of like, you play D&D or whatever, and you don't pay attention to all the other cool games out there. But used to, you walked into a store and it didn't even have to be a little boutique game shop, just a big chain retail store. And there were so many other games just right there next to what you're looking at. And you couldn't help but kind of glance over at those cool color covers and be like, what is Shadowrun? And then you kind of flip through that and you look at all the art, which art always got me. I own a ton of BattleTech books. I never played BattleTech, but I love the art. So I've got like, I would buy BattleTech books with these kind of vague notions that I'd play it one day because I just love the giant robots.
Yeah, guilty as charged. I think most of my books are in that category.
I think they actually are across a couple editions, but I don't know. But it was like, man, this game with these giant robots walking through towns, these big guns. This looks cool. We should play this someday. And I just pick up the books just to, I don't know. But they were next to D&D stuff, so I couldn't help but like, I'm looking at my complete book of dwarves. It's like, what the hell is that mech? Make a second purchase.
But if I'm not mistaken, now Wizards of the Coast are pulling physical distribution, no? So it's not I didn't figure out how that's going to work exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of gossip about that, and of what it means, because like when it comes to distribution, they are so big that they don't have to play by the same rules that a lot of other companies do, because they also have distribution through like the toy lines instead of just books. So there is talk that they might try to market a lot of it through their toy distributors. And then they also have actual just sales representatives direct with large retailers. So large retailers, I don't think it's going to change them at all. But your smaller retailers, like your privately owned bookstores or shops or all
The
that,
smaller ones.
yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. But I hope they have it all in place. I don't know. I think a lot of people are speculating, but and I think a lot of the doom and gloom is for if they were a company that was small or a medium, that would all be true. But they're so big, they play by a different set of rules
Yeah,
than everyone else.
That makes sense.
I remember my old dungeon master, the one that I hooked up with when I was 13. He had a one of his books had a Toys R Us price tag on it, and I always thought that was so crazy that like you used to be able to go to like Toys R Us toy store and buy Dungeons and Dragons. Like, what's that? Which they're gone now, but so the idea that it was marketed with toys is not new. That's old. So that might be what they're doing. I don't know. I think, and I don't think it's going to mess with stuff like Amazon or the online stuff. So I don't know how much it's really going to change things. The book industry is so bizarre and outdated and weird that they don't the book industry is somewhere like 50 years behind the rest of the world. That was one of the most frustrating things when I got into writing, is it made no sense. Like when I was trying to query my first novel around 2006, I think, you still had to mail the letter, the 1-page letter, to the agency with an included self-addressed stamped envelope for them to send you your rejection back. They
wouldn't accept email.
There was no email. Like I think out of all the agents that I queried, and this is 2006, 2007, there was only 1 or 2 agents that accepted email.
Ooh.
And they were like, it was weird. So they're really based off of an old style. They're so slow to evolve. And then when it comes to distribution, where it's like the bookstores don't own the books on the shelves. And if they don't sell it for so much time, they send it back to the publisher, and the publisher sends that back to the bookstore, and they have to eat the cost of printing and shipping and all that. And that made sense in the bygone days where all the bookstores are privately owned. The bookstore owner could not possibly afford to buy all of the inventory on their shelves. So this was set up so bookstores could have shelves stocked with stuff without them having to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars just to stock the shelves with books that may or may not sell. And that way you could get like the newest book, or they could kind of experiment with what they sent the bookstores. That was great. And that made so much sense. But then we entered an age where bookstores were these massive conglomerate companies that in a lot of ways were larger and richer than the book publishers were. And it completely swapped. where used to the book publisher was this multi-million-dollar company, and the bookstore was a small, privately owned bond paw sort of deal, and they're trying to get by month to month. When all of a sudden the bookstore is an even larger multi-billion-dollar company, and they don't have to pay for the stocks on their shelves. And it's like it's so weird, but that's just how we've always done it. And so all the fixes to it are all these patches that have been made. And when you're new to it, you're coming in, you're like, this makes no sense. Why it would remotely be like this? And say, well, you have to go back to like the 19-teens. I was like, nobody's just like hit reset. It's just patches. Like, somebody's still trying to operate their business off of like an old copy of Windows 98. And it's just patches.
Like, I'm a software engineer. I'm very familiar with that.
I worked at a university until 2016, and it was still operating off of like 90s level software that was just a patchwork. The IT department were like you have no idea how like held together with like spit this entire system is. But so with Wizards changing their distribution system, I have no idea what that'll mean, because that industry has been in need of such changes for so long. And when you're at a company that large, that also has toy distribution, that they're talking directly with the large big retailers, it's a different set of rules.
Yeah,
So
I
I
imagine
don't know.
they can change the system entirely, and they could be okay. So, yeah,
Yeah, or it could be doom and gloom. I don't know.
I
So,
mean, either way. So let's see. Mia Geek is saying, I lucked out on the PX on Camp Pendleton. Had a huge hobby section with minis and a lot of D&D material in the early 80s. Okay, PX. I'm not sure what the PX is, so no idea. But yeah, I think you could use to buy these things right off the shelf.
I stuff like getting minis. There are tons of places you could get minis and all that. And I was a giant mini collector, and I got out of it for a couple of years, and then we ended up changing games, and I said like, I need some new minis for this campaign because our old one I had enough inventory, I didn't need to go looking for it. And I think I was so busy writing with my free time that I wasn't painting anymore. So I took like 6 years where I didn't buy or paint minis. And then when we flipped to probably, I think when we started Call of Cthulhu, I was like, man, I need to get some minis or something like that. And all of the places I used to go were gone. And I
Oh,
didn't even look online to see if they were still there. It'd just been a couple of years since I went. I just got in my car and I went. And so I'm driving all over the Dallas Fort Worth area. I'm like, okay, let me go to this shop. It's like, they closed. That sucks. And one of them was like, we've moved and we're here. It's like, okay. And I went to there. It's like, we've closed. Like, oh my God. And then and I went around to several, and all of them were gone. And it was like the saddest day because I didn't even bother looking. I just assumed they were there because they had been there for forever.
yeah,
And evidently, because I stopped buying minis for a few years, they were just
you are the one last customer that just keeping them afloat.
yeah. And there was one that was left in the area that I used to visit in the '90s that was still there, and they were doing well. But during the pandemic and the lockdown stuff, I made a point. I went there once a month to buy something, and I didn't care what. Like there was nothing really they had that I wanted anymore. I've got all the dice and I've got all the books that or whatever. But like I would walk in there and I'd buy like a bottle of paint. It was like I will not enter this building without making some purchase to help be sure that once this is over, they're still here, because they're the last of of the places that you could buy stuff that wasn't just D&D. And
Mhm.
they had a really cool atmosphere. They always had these game nights, but that wasn't going on at the time. So yeah, totally different realm versus walking in walls of miniatures and lots of places, just so much to shopping. So oh well.
Okay, so Scatter Terrain and Campaign Terrain are telling me that DPX is like a tiny Walmart on a base. Okay, thanks for that. And speaking of miniatures, if anyone wants to drop any pictures for the community showcase for later in the stream, I'm putting in the link now. Now, I see that Dungeon Matron has a very good question, but we're going to come back to that in a second because I wanted to ask you uh, what came first, the writing or the gaming? I mean, I know that you became a published author later on, obviously, but was writing something you started when you were younger?
When I was very young, and we're talking 9, 10. Yeah, I always wanted to like write a book and stuff, but yeah, then that kind of faded because you're a kid and things faded. And yeah, I won some like creative writing awards when I was actually also about 13. But then when I entered high school, I got into the debate team. I got very active in Boy Scouts. I had other stuff, and that kind of just fell by the wayside. And after I graduated university, and I had to get my first corporate, adult job. And I moved away from my small college town where all of my friends were. And I didn't move far, but it was just far enough that I couldn't hang out with them
Mm-hmm.
after, every day. And so I had a lot of just time being alone because they were, 20 minutes away. And I decided to start writing. And so I ended up joining like an online writing workshop, and I just started writing as just what I did. And I guess that was around 2001 that began, and I was terrible. So a lot of time spent on the writing workshop learning how to write. Uh, and because at first you think like, oh, it's easy, I know what I'm doing, and then
You just put one word after another word and you're done.
oh yeah, and I wrote my first novel, and I was halfway. I was like about 75% done with the sequel before I realized that it was unsellable. But I learned how to write in the process of it, so I put it away and I started a new novel, and that was the one that ended up selling as my debut in 2014. So, but by the time I started writing that first publishable book, I had been taking writing very seriously as my side hobby for 10 years.
All right.
And then my first short story sale was 2006, but it took 2 years to hit print from when I sold it, which is forever. So I sold that in 2006. It was printed in a magazine in 2008. But at that point, I've been writing for like 7 years, and there was no evidence that it was going anywhere until it hit that first magazine, which, I did it because I enjoyed it, but it is a very lonely, frustrating process.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But
I mean, that takes a lot
that
of
whole
dedication at that
time,
point.
yeah, and that whole time I was, we were gaming and we're playing, different games, and that was all going well. Just the writing was what I did as my massive creative help. But it was a long, frustrating, just journey to go from I think I want to start writing to holding a book with your name on the cover.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very long term goal. It's not something just jump into.
No, and you have to do it because you enjoy it, because it's it's lonely, and you have to learn how to take criticism. You also need to learn how to take criticism and ignore this, but take this. You can't take all of it to heart, because some people, when they try to criticize, are wrong. But then you also have to know when somebody's saying something that you might not want to hear, but they're completely right on. And that's a whole learning curve itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's to be honest, that kind of introspection is something that would help a lot of people in general. It's not just about writing.
Yeah. But it's not easy. So, and you have to also give yourself your own deadlines, which that's actually one of the hardest things. Is people will they'll either set a deadline that is too much, like every month I'm going to write 10,000 words, which in a normal month that's easy to do. You can knock that out. But then sometimes life happens and it gets hectic, and you don't have time because you've got all this other stuff going on, like work or family or whatever other obligations, and then you miss that deadline. Then you're kind of frustrated and you kind of taper off, and then you miss a second one, then you kind of give up. And I've seen so many writers over the years that would just that would do that, and they got out of it because they set too lofty of a goal, and then they got frustrated because they couldn't make that goal during times when it was busy or hectic or just life. So I always had no matter what happens, I have to do one chapter a month. And no specification of how long of a chapter. It could be a really short chapter. And if I finished it, I could write another. I could keep going. There's no maximum, but I had to do one chapter a month. And if it was getting to the end of the month and I wasn't meeting that deadline, I actually pressured myself. Like I would cancel plans to like hang out with friends and whatnot, because I had screwed off for the first half of the month. And this is like, I had to do it. And that was the only way I was able to actually get the novels done, because most of the time you've got the time to do it. But those times when you don't, if you set your goal too high, it's not going to be achievable. So that was how I was able to keep myself disciplined to keep going with it.
Do you also do like quality control at that point, or you just get a first draft out and then you'll sort it out later?
Because I was in the workshop, how it worked was you posted one chapter at a time. So I would put up a chapter, and people would review it. And in order to post anything else, you had to review so many other people. So you actually had to learn how to critically review other people. That was the best lesson, is learning how to critique, because you became a better writer by seeing what worked in others and having to articulate that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To them. As far as like different phrasing or different pacing and stuff like that, if you learn how to read that critically, you become better when it comes to your own stuff. And there's also that period where you get really good at reading critically, but you haven't quite figured out how to apply that to your own stuff yet. Like, well, these are your problems. And then people say that about you, and you're like, what? You look at it again, like, oh my God, I committed every one of these same mistakes that I could point out in others. So there's like that weird period where you are good at seeing the faults, except for you and yourself. So I would post those, and as they came in, I would update them. But as I'm still writing the new stuff, so it's all getting improved during the course of my writing it. So I didn't just knock out like a rough draft start to finish and then go back and start editing. It was the whole way through. I was like, rough. And then while I'm working the next one, I'm updating the second one. And it's still rough, but it's just, version 2 or 3 by the time the actual manuscript is done for the first time, because I've done revisions
Yeah.
along the whole way of at least polishing it. And then there's the actual polishing it once you've got a completed manuscript. But yeah, it was a whole process. Like, I didn't just finish a chapter and put it away until the whole thing was done. I was constantly fixing it and trying to make it read better.
Okay, I see that Go For It Painting has joined us. Hi, Go For It Painting. And okay, let's go to Dungeon Matron's question now. What prompted you to start your channel, Seth?
My channel? So my first my debut novel came out in 2014, and I was hanging out with some friends that were significantly older. I mean, they're old enough to be our parents, but they were, the woman worked with my wife. She was kind of like her mentor at work. We ended up befriending them, and we just go out and hang out and have dinners and stuff. And they were fascinating people. And the husband worked in different types of marketing and whatnot. He had done very well for himself in that. And I mentioned, like, yeah, my debut's coming out in like 2-3 months. And he's like, you need to start a YouTube channel. It's the second largest search engine. You need to make a YouTube channel. I'm like, what do I make a channel about? I don't know. And he's like, well, make it about writing. Like, I've written one book, and I'm hardly an expert at this. Like, Brandon Sanderson's got a YouTube channel, and he's written 10,000 books. What could I possibly do on this subject? He's like, well, you need to think about something to make a YouTube channel about. I'm like, okay. And fast forward 2.5 years, and I had I got to the point I was able to quit my day job. So I had a ton of time on my hands. And so I was writing, and I was doing all the stuff around the house, and which that list of stuff that, like, when I quit, I'm going to be able to do all these things around the house. In 3 months, you're done. Like, oh, I thought that would take a lot longer. And I had a bad game. I had a legendarily terrible game. Like, a close friend of mine I'd played with for 8-9 years, I was kicking out bad game. And I was really upset about it. And I was talking with some friends online, and one of them mentioned that what we had was a social contract issue because of stuff we had done. And I kind of wrote out what the actual unspoken social contract of RPGs is, as part of my catharsis for the fact that I was having to kick out this player, and I was mad, and I was just upset that it had gotten this far. And I ended up like, that guy always said I should make a YouTube channel. So I just set up a camera, and I had a post-it note that just had outline what that contract was. I just recorded it. I didn't know how to edit video. I had the worst camera in the world. I was trying to use the onboard point and click camera audio, so it's awful audio. Everything about it was terrible. But I posted it on YouTube, and after that was done, the second one became easier, and then the third one became easier. Then I was completely self-taught. I really didn't watch like RPG YouTube channels, so I had no idea what other people did, and so like it was bad. But I also discovered what my own voice would be without seeing what other people were doing. So you know that so I at least I at least was able to make a channel where I wasn't copying anybody either intentionally or unintentionally because I just didn't know. And then I watched other people and I was like, oh wow, they do this thing. It's a lot better than me. Like maybe I should buy a microphone and and all that. So it just kind of came about because I had in my head for a couple of years I should make a YouTube channel without knowing what it would be about. But since tabletop gaming was such a huge part of my life, that is a subject I knew enough about that I could do a lot of different uh, videos about and concerning, and I had at least some air of experience that I could share. So it's kind of a long-winded story of like how the YouTube channel came about, but it was very spontaneous when it happened, and that video was awful, and it's been archived, and I've since redone it a lot better. But it took that in order to kind of give me the kick in the butt to do it. And then once it was done, it was much easier to keep going and activate those parts of your brain where that's stuff you think about of like, this is a subject I could talk about one day. And I would open up a file of like video ideas. And it's occasionally you'd have a thought about you go and I kind of add like a little bullet point, like, I want to talk about this, bring this up. And I'll bring this up. And I've got that file that some of them have been there for years. I've just never been able to articulate enough or put enough thoughts there to like warrant a video. Or sometimes I'll go through and just like, I think it's about time we talk about this. And I'll kind of grab all that and I'll make a video out of it. So
Yeah, okay, that answers some questions because you do talk about things that nobody else talks about, basically like the RPG philosophy things and the social contract. And
and
yes, sorry, please go on.
no, go on, please. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that Campaign Train said, I so love what you've had to say about the social contracts. Fantastic stuff. And Dungeon Matron is saying you didn't just find one voice, you found out several.
And I think one of the other things that came about different because I wasn't involved in much of the RPG online community.
Mm-hmm.
The closest I had was I was very active in a Cyberpunk 2020 forum, which was all of 10 people and never active at the same time. So it was like more than 5 people were active on this board at any given time. So I also didn't know most of the terminology that had evolved over that time. Like the term railroad, I had never heard before. And so I had to like learn a lot of that later. But the culture of that you find if you're really active in stuff like Reddit or different Facebook groups or whatnot, of I guess where it's like what is expected of a game master, and a lot of it is since most of the people are players, or most of the people who don't actually play but they want to, so they just talk about it like they know what they're talking about. Put so much pressure on game masters, where it's like a game master has to do and everything in the world, and there was like this odd shift in it. So when I started looking at it, my perspective was completely different, and that's what I would talk about. If like it's a group, no, and I actually really need to spell this out better in a video. Is a game master is only as good as their players will let them be, and what that means is even the best game master in the world, if their players are jerks and they're very concerned about themselves, not about anyone else's fun, and uh, just don't play with a group mindset, that game master is not going to be able to run a good game. And so it's all a group effort. It's just a group that works well together will do amazing. But if you have one or two players that don't work in that fashion, the whole group suffers for it. And so it's not a, the game master runs the show and the players are all dazzled by it. They have to be good enough to let the game master give them a great game, because if they're not, the game's going to suck. And if you have a bunch of great players and a bad GM, the same thing happens. So it's a group effort where it takes everybody in the room to make that an amazing experience. And when you have stuff like Critical Role, and there's so much celebration toward Matt Mercer,
Yeah,
it's like,
all the crew there is amazing.
yeah, it takes a crew of amazing players to make that happen. If you threw him up there with a bunch of just random idiots, it wouldn't be as good. He wouldn't be able to be that good of a game master, because his players weren't allowing the game to thrive. They weren't working together. They weren't playing off of it. And so it really it's an experienced group of people who are interested in the whole group having fun in order for the game to succeed. And that's really where I came at it with the social contract, because it was also my way of kind of putting words to the thoughts of why this player, why I had to boot him. Like, what was he doing that was causing these issues? So the original RPG social contract was pretty much toward one guy of, this is what a player needs to do, and you didn't do any of this stuff, and this is what a game master needs to do. And sometimes players, when they're trying to kind of shirk responsibility, it's like, well, it's the game master's job to make sure that I know the rules, or it's the game master's job to know how my spell works. And it's like, no. But a game master doesn't need to know the rules, and they need this, and so I think when I started talking about the social issues at tables, I was coming from a very different mindset of kind of how the communities have kind of formed. So I also didn't know any of the phrasing, and I didn't know all the hot button issues that would get people riled up. So that was a minefield that I had to discover the hard way. So
Issues that would get people riled up, like what?
Yeah, for example, one of my early videos, and it is still to this day the most viewed video I have ever done, and I took it down 3 years ago, and it's still the most popular video I ever did, and it was awful. And it was over the 5 bad things that good players do, and
Okay,
I talked about a lot of concepts in there, but I failed to take into account that the people that I'm talking to, the audience, did not have the foundational knowledge of certain things. I was talking about it like everybody knew all the basics on it. So, for example, one of the things I brought up is what we refer to for years as 13th Warriors, which is a reference to a movie called The 13th Warrior, where
the one with Antonio
it's a theme
Banderas, yeah,
game.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a theme game where we're all going to have this theme. Like all of us are going to be dwarves, and we're all going to come from this little town, and we're going to be dwarves, and we're really going to deep dive into like being dwarves.
And someone shows up with a half dragon.
Yeah, and you're like, what are you doing? And like how this random thing that comes in can really sink the game, because not everybody's invested in it now. And now we're having like, why is this person here? And I talked about that. What I failed to explain is the concept of a theme game. I thought everybody knew that, which is silly because it took me many years to understand the concept of a theme game. So people didn't know, were seeing me like, oh, this one person does it, it's bad, without explaining, everybody agreed we're going to do this. This is what the whole game is about. I never explained.
But it sounds like such a simple concept that it doesn't really need that much explanation, does it? It's like, hey, we're all going to play dwarves. Okay.
Because you're an experienced gamer, it does. It seems so basic. Like, why are we explaining this? But to somebody that's actually just learning games, the concept that you can pick up like the D&D book, it's like, here's all the races you could play. The idea of like, what if we were all this in this setting, that we just made up. We're all humans in a human city, and there's no wilderness, there's no dungeon. It's all in this one city. That would blow their minds because they haven't seen that yet. You and I have seen that for decades. It's like, okay, so, but for new players and stuff, that's a concept that you have to learn. And if when I introduced that concept, I didn't give those foundational elements. I talked about the idea of like one trick ponies. I was looking at one trick ponies because I had been playing skill based games for years, and I remember in first edition AD&D when they did double and triple weapon specializations. Because used to your fighter, you had to choose exactly what weapons you could use, and that was it. Like I use a long sword and a broadsword and an axe and a mace, and that's it. I can't use anything else. And then double specialization came. I was like, well, if you use 2 of those specialization slots on longsword, you're even better with the longsword, but you only know 3 weapons. And if you spend 2 or 3 of those slots on longsword, you're like really good with the longsword, but you only know 1 other weapon. And it's like, well, what happens when they lose their longsword? It's like they're completely inept. And it was like that was a case where they were focusing themselves so much to a very, very niche thing.
Yeah,
Modern games now, it's like it's like martial weapons. A fighter knows all martial weapons. You didn't actually have to go through a list of every freaking martial weapon, and you have to say, "I know dagger." And but I was coming at it from that perspective. Modern gamers don't have that, and if they're coming from popular games like D&D, that's not a skill based game; it's a level based game. Everything that I said made no sense because they're trying to equate it to 5th edition or that. But an experienced gamer, when I just kind of give the basics of that, they're all caught up. They immediately know what I'm talking about because they have that foundational history. But when you're doing a YouTube video, you have to kind of say like, okay, we're going to lead up to this topic that I'm talking about. And you actually have to kind of baby step it up. So I had to learn how to do that. And that took a long time. And a lot of my stuff did come off as abrasive and arrogant and douchey because I just started the conversation as if I was talking to somebody that's been playing for 15 years across a spectrum of games. I didn't give any pretext or pretext to like what it was. So it was kind of like learning curves as far as how to present topics. And with that video of like the 5 worst characters that good players make, I have redone every single one of those topics, but some of them took an entire video to talk about something that in that video I only talked about for 3 minutes because I had to introduce all of that information leading up to why this is bad, of why somebody who refuses to adapt to the theme is bad. And if we're going to all agree to a theme, we all need to play by the theme. So yeah, that was all part of the learning curve, which,
yeah, it's interesting how you're going back and reanalyzing what you said and taking it apart and rebuilding it. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and I had to figure that out because I'd get comments. I got so much hate, but I had to figure out like, well, why is this happening? And I couldn't just say like they're idiots and they're trolls on the internet. I had to figure out like why do these same comments keep coming up? And it occurred to me as they don't have that foundation. And then I had to rewind and say they might be new to the game or they might not have ever played some of the stuff I'm talking about. And I did absolutely zero to introduce.
How did you connect the dots on that? Because it
took a long time.
Okay.
Well, it's also like with editing that I talked about with when you're getting reviews to each other. One of the other things that's very difficult to do when you're editing a novel or short story and you're getting critiques is sometimes people will say there's something wrong with this sentence, and they'll say what it is, and like they'll suggest how to fix it. And you can look at it and you can go, there is something wrong with that sentence, but you didn't identify the correct thing. It's wrong. This other thing was wrong with it, but because it was wrong, the editor went off this other direction, and that is a really weird skill to have to figure out. Because they'll say this is wrong with it, and you can go, no, that's not wrong with it, but then you have to look at it and go, but there has to be something wrong with it because several people have pointed out there's an issue with this sentence or this paragraph or this phrasing, and none of them really actually hit what it was, because your mistake was so deeper than that by the time they realized there was a mistake, they misidentified what the mistake was. And it takes a lot, because you get so many just trolls and idiots and whatnot leaving comments that it's really easy to write them off. So it actually takes, you have to get so many to realize, like, well, maybe it isn't you. Maybe it is me. What did I do wrong that failed to deliver a concept? And you realize, like, well, I failed to deliver the concept. That's what was wrong with it. It wasn't my phrasing. It was that I completely failed to explain what a theme game was.
Okay, so Quizboard Train is saying the archetypes are very effective and entertaining. I think that's the when you put on the different
all the costumes.
The costumes, yeah. Especially the ones at the table. Do your players see themselves in your characters?
Well, so the concept of the players at the table, there was no master plan of that. That just kind of happened. And the first one came about from that original video that I took down of 5-player habits that go bad, or whatnot, where I wanted to kind of show this interaction. And all my friends are at work, and I'm not gonna have them come over to do this stupid video stuff I'm doing. So I'll just do it. So I had long hair at the time, so I let my hair down, and I had a baseball cap. I put it on backwards, put on an old Ramones shirt, and I just spoke in a kind of cartoony voice, which was actually the voice of one of my players used for a character that he played years ago. This kind of like surfer bro dude. And I thought that was kind of fun to do. And I put it in a black and white filter, so it was obvious that this was like something separate than me just talking. But also, it ended up, the black and white filter helped sell the idea that these are different people for some reason, because if you show any of my characters in color, they're so much more obviously me and the cheapest mustache in the world. But when you put a black and white filter on it, it helps kind of fool people into thinking that is not clearly me and the fakest mustache in the world talking in a really outlandish voice. So I did that. That was fun. So I ended up using that character several times. I never named him, because it was supposed to be like a 1-time or a 2-time or 3-time or 4-time thing. So it never occurred to me that I should name these characters. And then I had a video where I needed to have that character interact with other players, because it was always just the player and the GM interacting. Mm-hmm. So I need to come up with some other players. And I went to like a little party store that had like fake mustaches that you get for like a kid's birthday party, like the cheapest thing on earth. And it was a bandito, like a Mexican bandito. So it had this like curly mustache and this goatee, and it was like $5. I'm like, cool, that's 2 costumes, and I bought it. And you're supposed to use it once, and I just kept sticking double-sided tape on the back until it was like this plate of doubles. I had to peel it off and stick it, and then like we had a kitten, and it kept getting a hold of like them, and so the goatee is like shredded, because I've never replaced the goatee. I had to replace the mustache because of the curl, but it's the original goatee chewed up by kittens that was supposed to be worn once. I've been wearing it for 6 freaking years. So that just came about, and I referred to them in some videos as players 1, 2, and 3. Like, I never named them until finally enough people said, like, where are their names? And I had to acknowledge this was a thing I did. These were actual parts of my channel instead of a one-time gag. So I ended up naming them. But it was never planned, and I almost resisted the concept that these were me. This is what I did. This is my channel, because I don't know. I know what I was doing. I just thought it was funny at the time.
And what about Jack the NPC? Because I think you put him on, as a named character pretty early on. Yeah?
Jack showed up very early on my channel, and I had I had an idea where I wanted to review a game. It's a post-apocalyptic Call of Cthulhu setting, and it's like, it would be cool as if like I'm talking, and then there's like kind of like an explosion, and then it's me doing the whole thing, but with this post-apocalyptic background behind it. And I need a green screen for that, so I need to get a green screen. And so my channel started at the end of November. So it's the first couple of weeks. We're still in December. There's all sorts of sales for Christmas and stuff going on. So I went on Amazon and I bought a green screen. And uh, it was one of those things where like you can get a green screen that's this big for this much, but if you add like $1, you get this much more. And like, okay, it's just $1. I say, oh, if you add $1, you get like this much more. Oh,
How
okay,
large was the final green screen?
it is enormous, man. And it goes floor to ceiling, folds back up, and then is clipped at the bottom. So the top of the bottom are actually clipped at the top. And it is, yeah. Anyway, buying stuff online is a risk. So I got this green screen for like $20. That's big enough to sail
No
a
way.
freaking ship by, right? And at the time, YouTube you monetized immediately. So now you have to hit like so many views and so many subscribers, but you used to monetize immediately. So you could see how much you made. And no one was watching my channel. It's brand new. And I would make like 2 cents a day. And so I spent $20 on the screen and I'm looking at the money coming in it's a big day. I made 3 cents. And it's like, it's going to take me a decade to pay off this green screen. I need to come up and I want to use it for one video. I need to come up with a reason to use this more than one time because this is a terrible way to do this channel if my stuff is costing that much more. And I wanted to do a review of the Call of Cthulhu scenario, The Haunting. And that was my introduction to Call of Cthulhu. And I wanted to talk about the fact that teaching your players how to do an investigative game if they're used to D&D or we did lots of cyberpunk for years where like before you go charging into the haunted house, maybe you should research the history of the house. Those things that once again they're basic for a Call of Cthulhu player.
Yeah, but remember you are soft and squishy.
Yeah, and so what my idea was I was going to have an NPC who was this kind of like washed up alcoholic detective who specialized in like supernatural stuff. And the player characters were trying to get in some sort of like supernatural club. You had to have a verified experience with the supernatural to even get into this club, right? And he was like this detective. He was like, hey, I got this job. If you want to meet the supernatural, you want to come along. And his car was broken down. I was like, yeah, I got a car. So why don't you drive me there? And like, but so he was kind of like the veteran, but he was kind of this drunk dumbass. So when the players like, well, why don't we go there? He'd be like, wait, before we do that, well, like, why don't we find out if there's stuff there? So he'd kind of like throw out those suggestions of stuff that just hadn't crossed their minds that was an option yet. Like, oh, okay. And he never made his rolls because he sucked. Meaning I wanted the players to make the rolls. He wasn't going to do all this stuff for them. And sometimes he would give bad suggestions to not make it where everything that he said was a good idea, but he could at least voice concepts like, well, yeah, there's nothing in the library. Is anywhere else we could find out stuff about this? Like, oh, let me think about that. It's like, I bet the Hall of Records has something. Like, oh, yeah, it's a good one. And yeah, we could expand out from this. And his name was Jack. So when I reviewed The Haunting, and since it's an introductory scenario, and in 7th edition, they actually have it in the free quick guide where like you get the job and it says in the handout, you can go to these places to research. And it's like, I did this NPC where I didn't tell them up front they could research these places. I wanted them to think about it, but I wanted to walk them into introducing the concept of an investigative game. So I decided like, hey, I'll just do Jack. And so I put on a fedora that I had and suit that I had, and I stuck up a green screen and I talked in this kind of cartoony voice. As Jack, who was an NPC I used for that one adventure. And in the campaign, we used him a couple more times before they kind of learned what they needed to, and he kind of faded off in the distance. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was fun. It was fun
Definitely
to do.
Very immersive.
And I then did a couple videos after that where I didn't use Jack because he was just something that I did for that one. And I ended up using him again because I thought it was a fun gag. And then I did him for like a D&D thing, and I had to put him in a different costume. And then I started doing back and forth with him versus just cut to him talking like he would talk to me and I would reply and blah, blah, blah. So it just kind of evolved. But there was a period after that first video when I did it that there was like several before he showed up and a couple more before he showed up, before he became like, if I'm doing a review, you will definitely see Jack in a different outlandish costume who, no matter what the setting is, always has the exact same voice. So, even when I play the kid or I'm a Chinese wuxia warrior, it's always the exact same voice. It's this really stupid, cartoony kind of Brooklyn sort of accent. But it all came about because of this one video that I needed to justify why I bought a green screen to do a different video. Awesome. That's the longest answer in the world.
By the way, speaking of your sketches, the one where what had you called it? How the Beholder was invented. That one killed me.
I remember the moment that came to me, and I was opening up the refrigerator, which it sounds like the Alfred Hitchcock refrigerator theory, but I was literally getting stuff. I was kind of like going through this whole scene in my head. And I remember I was opening up the freezer and the whole line, it ain't got a butthole, popped into my head. I was cracking up because I have come up with so many video ideas that are so over the top hilarious, but I would never ever post them because they are so vulgar and they're just so out there. And I'm like, I'm going to do this one because this one amuses me, and I think enough people would get the joke. And so it came about because of that. But yeah, that was the thing. And it was weird. It's like nobody watched that one. I was pretty sure that one was going to get popular just because it was about D&D. And nobody. It's actually one of my least performing videos that I've ever done. Is the true history of the Beholder. And I've had to actually I've redone like the title slide several times because I'm like, why is nobody watching this? Because I think it's hilarious.
It is.
And then 2 years later, I did one again over the Mimic, but I at least walked in knowing like, okay, no one's going to watch this except for the people that do watch. You're going to love it. And so it's also this big underperforming, but the feedback on it is like overwhelmingly positive because it is so ridiculous. It's so just elaborately stupid because I had to buy all new fake mustaches. Like I have like mutton chops and all this crap because it's just, I want to be in this 1970s setting with wood paneling behind me.
In a shoemaker's basement, if I remember correctly.
Gygax was a cobbler, right when TSR found it.
Really?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of references to. I really do know the history of this stuff, but I'm just going to ignore that, and we're going to come up with the most outlandish story on Earth of mostly dealing with cocaine. Which Gygax did have a big cocaine habit, but that was later after D&D got really successful and he moved to California to do the movies and TV show stuff. But it's just a lot funnier to say that the reason the Beholder exists is because some guy was on cocaine.
But yeah, that was a great video. And in case anyone hasn't watched it yet, I'm just going to post a link to your channel again. Go watch it. It's good.
And yeah, and that's part of like what I call the gang series. And I do about one gang video a year, because they're so difficult. They're nothing but a skit back and forth, which means I have to put on all the outfits
and to talk to yourself, basically. Yeah.
And talk to myself. But editing it is hell because every single little clip. So I actually have to like write out exactly what they're going to say, who they're talking to. So I've got them all looking in the right spot because they're all me. And you have to film it. And then I have to like edit it down into like these short little clips back and forth for like several minutes straight. And the first one of those came about because I did a lot more early on. I don't know, I felt dirty. It was like almost like the clickbaity of like the 5 worst, the 5 best, sort of stuff. And that's when I realized I wasn't spending enough time on any one topic. So actually that kind of fell by the wayside. But so I do full videos about like what I call the RPG terrorist, which was the guy that, that's what my character would do. They're using, I'm role playing to justify crappy behavior. And everybody knows it's crappy behavior, but they're hiding behind I'm role playing when it's this is what I want to do, sort of stuff. And they're kind of holding the game hostage under the pretense that they're role playing. They're not. I did one over the Edgelord because people were like, "Do the Edgelord, talk about the Edgelord," like, and I kind of looked at it, like, this actually isn't really a problem. There's a lot of behaviors that people call edgelordy, but I don't think there's actually a problem player called the edgelord that has all these traits. They're just other bad player behavior kind of getting lumped into this category because they also are that. And I thought it was like, I'll do a video on this where it's basically they're not really a problem, but they're really freaking fun to make fun of. So I had it where like I started talking about, I was like, I can't do it, and then the player's like, oh no, but we'll make fun of it. Like, we got this. And I had this new intro that suddenly plays halfway through, and it's nothing but a skit. The rest of it of the most over the top, ridiculous edgelord, just for humor's sake. And yeah, that kind of led to another one of just different video topics I wanted to do that didn't fit into the channel, such as the pop culture debate of like Kirk versus Picard. And I framed it where it's literally just a game that players are talking, and the GM stepped out of the room for a minute, and when they're supposed to be planning on how to get out of the situation, it's really just them talking about like pop culture, and that sort of thing. And like I did one over like stormtroopers, and these are conversations that my friends and I have had for so many years, that we've had added so many facets to it and debates that I was like, I'm just going to do a video that's just a skit of the guys talking, that's kind of framed with a game. They're playing a game in the background, sort of thing. So that was so the gang videos. They're all underperformers, but they're usually the ones that I find the most fun to make. They're the hardest to make, but they're just really stupid and fun. So I love every one of them.
Yeah. They're definitely super entertaining to watch. Okay, going back to gaming for a second.
Oh yeah.
Okay, first of all, you've reviewed and played tons of different games and systems over the years. Do you have a particular favorite?
Call of Cthulhu 7th edition is my favorite. It's such a clean system. It's the type of game that I like. It's everybody always associates it with 1920s, but you could do any sort of backdrop with it. I think
we had Sandy Peterson over a few months ago, and he was just explaining that, and that was like, okay, I never thought about it that way.
Well, and Sandy prefers modern day. Like he was forced to do 1920s because Stafford and them thought the 20s was more interesting, and that's what Lovecraft was writing it. But Sandy prefers modern day because horror works best modern because it's our world. It's right now. This could happen to you.
There's no disconnection kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not like 100 years ago that this is happening. This is happening today, and we're using this week's calendar to the countdown to Doomsday, and that's my favorite system. Now, no game can do it all. It just can't. So I have a lot of others that I do, like for Call of Cthulhu, for long campaigns where it's not one shots. Mm-hmm. Where it's either we've strung together adventures into like a arc of these characters going through it all, or just a long story campaign. I'll use Pulp Cthulhu because it's a little bit beefier. Your characters have a better chance of surviving, and you got a little bit more ass kicking to you because it still feels really good just to punch the bad guy. Call of Cthulhu player characters are really squishy, so we'll do Pulp Cthulhu if it's a campaign. And if it's like a one shot, it's pure Call of Cthulhu because you should be absolutely vulnerable and nothing should set you apart from the average Joe. You are a cab driver. And there's nothing spectacular about you other than you're a cab driver who has now found themselves in the worst imaginable situation possible. Let's see what happens.
Or rather, the worst unimaginable situation, given its Call of Cthulhu.
Yes. But you're not like special forces. You're Jerry, the cab driver. And then my second favorite game is Traveler because that hits a lot of my other niches and needs. So, but I like to play a lot of different games and see what's out there now. But if you told me like I could only play one game ever and I was done and I think that's it would be Call of Cthulhu because it is consistently hits everything that I want and can give me a wide range of stuff I could want in the future. So that's it. I can also grab somebody that's never played an RPG before and get them playing Call of Cthulhu in like 2 minutes. Say, okay, if you got a skill in this, roll percentage dice. This is how percentage dice works. Roll under that number. Okay, we're good. Let's go. Like, there's no roll this and add this and do this and say no. Just roll into that number. We're done. Like if you got a bonus, roll that twice. Take the better one. If you got a bonus, roll that twice. Take the lower one, and we're done. Keep going. It's just so easy because there's no math in the game, and I find it very intuitive. When I did my review series or how to for Call of Cthulhu, I did get a lot of people talk about how complicated it was. And one concept that I do want to do a video talking about is front complexity versus back complexity.
All right.
And what that means is like, okay, D&D 5th edition is a back complex game. So you look at the combat section, and it's real easy. Like you read this and you're like, oh man, this is simple. This is going to be the simplest D&D combat that's ever happened. This is great. We can play this in like no time. But then you get to each character class has these special abilities that do this, and you could
they
do
interact
like
this way.
3 times a day. I can shoot an extra arrow that catches on fire and disintegrates somebody, and everybody's got their own thing. So as you're going, the combat is becoming more and more complicated because the characters, whatever particular classes and races and everything they are, add a complexity. And then as they're getting more powerful, they're getting more and more and more of these abilities. So combat suddenly quickly becomes very complicated. But none of them are rules that are from the combat section. They only come about from the characters and as the characters progress, because you add more and more special abilities. Call of Cthulhu is a forward complex game. So you read it and you get everything you'll ever need to know about combat. So it's actually a little bit more complicated than D&D at first, but that's it. It never gets more complicated than this. So once you know both of them and you look at it, you're like, this one's way more easy. But D&D, it's like, oh, it's real simple. Just do this, this, and this, and you're good to go. And you're like, really? Oh yeah, I promise. And then it becomes like really, really a lot. Call of Cthulhu, that's it. You're done. Once you have it, you're done.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, it's not that complicated. You just have to roll under. I mean, we've been playing a lot of rule-style games, especially Easy D6 recently.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we're trying other stuff. Like I think yesterday we played Survive This and a couple of games of Call of Cthulhu, of course. We did try a game of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I used to play it back in the day. We're like, yeah, this might be a bit more complicated than what we're used to. 5 minutes into it, we're like, what's with all the mats?
Well, it's like Call of Cthulhu is there's like the bonuses and penalties, which I love because there's no math. There's no like add +5, -15, blah blah. And you're going to get up to 2 bonuses or 2 penalty dice. So it's not just like D&D where you can get 1 of each and they cancel out. It's like you can have up to 2, but they never put in one spot. You get a bonus if you lay down. You get the penalty if you're running. You get all that. So I actually just assembled that into a cheat sheet because, like in Cyberpunk 2020, they had a page called Friday Night Firefight, and every modifier was in a color. So when my players played it, they could look at it and they're like, "I want to do this." It's like, "Oh, it's only -3 to have fired 2 weapons." And it's like, "Oh, if I jump, it's just this." So all of a sudden, they're like leaping out of moving cars, the pistol at each hand, and they're in a freaking Chow Yun Fat, sort of thing, and we're having a great time. So Call of Cthulhu, you can do all that stuff in. They just didn't put it all on one page, so I put it all on there, and that's how we play. It's such a cinematic system, and it's really easy because there's no combat. People like to say it's not a combat game. Like it is. It's got an amazing combat system, but it's not the focus. Investigation's the focus, and you're squishy. A bullet will probably kill you. And if you're hurt, you're probably going to be hurt until the adventure is completely done. Meaning there's no shrugging it off and somebody casts a heal spell on you.
Potion, whatever, yeah. Yeah, good point.
No, it's like a guy stabs you with a knife. Like, oh my God, that was half my hit points. And you're not getting them back. you are probably at death's door until this is over, and we're only 5 minutes into the game. You probably shouldn't have like mouthed off to that guy. So people confuse that with it's not made for combat. With no, it is. It's just like real life. You probably shouldn't do that stupid thing. If somebody shoots a gun, you should get down. You should hide. You probably shouldn't be picking fights with random people because you're squishy and you could die. And it's also RuneQuest's combat system.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It's like,
RuneQuest and Stormbringer, they're the same engine.
yeah, they're like, it's not made system not made for combat. I was like, it was originally RuneQuest. What are you talking about? It was made for combat. It just wasn't D&D combat. So when we go back and we do play a lot of the older games, now that we've seen how modern games have really streamlined it, stuff that we thought at the time was so simple, you can look at now, you're like, oh my God, Thaco, what the hell was that about? It's shit. At the time, it was simple. It's just how it worked. Like now I can go back and look at a lot of stuff, having seen how games have evolved and they've streamlined it over the years, and we figured out what works and what doesn't. And they've just gotten better and better and better. You look at that early stuff where they didn't know what worked and they're kind of throwing stuff at a wall. And you're like, whoa, wow, that was complicated.
It was, and still we made it work somehow. I mean, I remember some good stories came out of those systems.
When I'm remembering great stories from our games, we will sometimes talk about, hey, remember that time we did this? Like, and we're talking 20 something years ago. We'll then debate on what system we were even playing. Like I don't know. And a lot of my war stories will talk about, say, yeah, we're playing either first or second edition. It doesn't really matter. Like we don't know. And we debate what we were playing. And then we'd play like another fantasy game that was using the Cyberpunk Interlock Unlimited, horribly house ruled into a fantasy game hack. And it's like, we were playing D&D. It's like, no, we were playing the Interlock. Like, no, are you sure? It's like we don't remember what system it was. In the end, the stories we remember of what the characters did, what the bad guys did, and all the crazy stuff that happened. And whether we were playing this edition or that edition is like kind of a trivial thing, because the story was us being silly and having fun. So a lot of it at the end doesn't really matter, as long as the game doesn't take away from the fun. The stories are always good. So the people, when they were playing original D&D in the 70s versus the newest 5th edition or 6th edition or whatever is coming out next year, their stories to them are going to be just as awesome as each other, because that's what makes it good. The system doesn't actually make it better. As long as the system doesn't make it worse, it's all good. That's
a good point also. So let's see. Dungeometry is saying, I prefer 1920s Call of Cthulhu because technology plays less of a part in solving mysteries. I love the idea of player characters learning of a tragedy in the newsreel at a movie theater prior to a Laurel and Hardy film.
Yeah, and that's actually really cool. Are those aspects of the 1920s that are modern but not? Like I remember there was one talking about, if you want to investigate stuff, you could just you picked up the phone and you asked the operator like information about the thing, and you could befriend the operator, and the operator could be like, see, at the time you picked up was like, operator, can you get me through to 234 Lexington? And like there were a person that was on the phone. Like, we don't have that now. And you couldn't like just start asking a random stuff about the calling habits of somebody that lived on this street. And it was say, you're the best, Gladys, I'll buy you some flowers. Like whatever. Like that is not our culture anymore. That is alien to us. Of like, what? You picked up and an operator answered, and that's how you placed your call, versus I just, I hit what was programmed in my phone and I can't even remember the phone number anymore. It's a totally different world. That stuff is cool, and I love those aspects to it. Now, stuff like that, I feel like a game master has to kind of introduce to their players, because it would never occur to them that they could just pick up the phone and ask the operator if the person living at this place has been making calls recently, or that sort of information. Or you get the news because you're all in a packed theater, and it's like, today in the news, and you get some sort of newsreel before your movie starts or whatnot. But I don't think that modern times in technology, it actually limits stories. It changes them. There are certain stories from like 1920s or Gaslight or 1950s or 80s you could not do today because of cell phone. uh, doesn't work. Like there's like a YouTube channel or something that was like about movie plots that wouldn't work with cell phones. Well, if they had a cell phone, it'd just do away with it. And but I think the types of stories we can tell change. And this is actually something Sandy and I have talked about quite a bit. It's like, the concept of like how cell phones can be used in horror. There was one, I cannot remember it. Which, by the way, just going to give some context here. Sandy and I actually hang out and we watch movies like once every month. So this is why I'm like talking about it. I'm like, we're talking. Is like, we were watching a movie and it was some Japanese horror movie. And I asked him later what it was. And he's like, I don't remember, because the man knows more Japanese and Korean horror movies that no one's ever heard of than anyone. So we can't even keep him all straight anymore. But where they were getting messages from their friend, something weird had happened. They're getting messages from their friend. They're tracking down. They finally get to these warehouses and they get in the room, and the friend has been dead for like 10 days.
Ooh,
and the corpse is holding the phone, and all the messages, right, like the corpse's thumbs on them, and they're just dead. And it was like this whole aspect of they were getting texts from the dead person that's been dead for a week who doesn't know that they're dead. It was just this weird aspect. It's like you can only do that in a world where we have cell phones
exactly, yeah.
and text messages. And then we use like a Find My Phone app to find out where they are. And it's this old warehouse, and like they're decomposed for several days of whatever the bad thing was that killed them. So it changes the types of stories we can tell, but new technology always brings in something new that we can add horror to. Which, the internet can get rid of a lot, but it can also bring a lot of new ways and stories we can have. Because now we can have found footage stuff that appears on YouTube. There was a like Cthulhu modern day scenario called Hell in Texas, that the investigators are members of a Reddit community for like supernatural stuff or something happening in Texas. And this is the pool of your player characters. Doesn't matter what you are in real life. As it on the side, you like to go to this Reddit page where you're an active member of the community, and this weird thing's happening, and it's near you, and you all end up like going to it. And it's also a cool source of new characters. Like if a
Oh,
character
yeah.
goes and they die, well, make your new character. The only thing is, you belong to this Reddit community. You can be a doctor, you can be a cop, you can be a cabbie, you can be a student, whatever it is you want to be, because your side thing, your hobby, is you belong to this weird supernatural community. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great way
It's
of getting
also
connecting
it's also
characters. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a cool way of also getting like information. Like if like the players are baffled, and you're like, okay, let's do an idea roll. Like, how are we gonna do this? Like, okay, ask the Reddit community.
Post Reddit. Boop.
Yeah, and it's like, would it fail? It's like, yeah, because like that one guy answered the wrong thing. There's always that guy. Yeah, like maybe they don't know, or they tell you the wrong thing of what that means,
Ooh.
because so and so they don't actually speak ancient Greek. They're trying to use Google Translate. It's horribly wrong, and they're like, okay, let's do that. So, but it changes stories, because when Lovecraft wrote his stuff, it was about the most cutting edge technology at
Yeah,
that
exactly.
time. Like you had the submarines that were shooting torpedoes downward into the city outside of Innsmouth, and like they just discovered Pluto, and oh my god, the fungi from Yugoth were coming, and that was
even something as simple as
new.
air conditioning. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
horrors of air conditioning, which no. But that was all new to them. We read it now, and it's kind of this quaint, old timey time, but to them, that was today. That was tonight. That could happen to me. I could move into an apartment, and there's a guy upstairs whose air conditioning broke and he died. So I think that's a really cool aspect. I love the 20s because I love the look of the 20s, and I love that little bit of primitive yet modern. Like I love it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think that it's superior. I think that's just my taste, because I think there's a cool look to it. I think we have a romanticized view of supernatural stuff for the 20s is somehow cooler than it is now. Like you're watching a period film, like, well, they put the budget in to have these old timey cars and these wonderful costumes. This is probably pretty good. Versus if it's now, it's going to, yeah, this is probably some low budget crappy horror movie. And I don't know, at least I do that, where it's like,
No, it's a fair bias. I think that is the thing that happens unless you've got some A-list actors, then there is that kind of bias in there.
And one other thing though with old movies and whatnot is like when you watch stuff like the new Murder on the Orient Express that Kenneth Branagh did, you're kind of looking at this places that are familiar but somehow kind of twisted and alien. It's like he's going to locations, but it's not like it is now, and it's like and the sense of opulence on things is like so beyond what we have, where it's like gold leafing inside the cars, and it's like, oh wow, and like everybody's dressed like this way. It's like kind of this like it's fantasy, but it's not fantasy.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's
I get that feeling sometimes looking at things. For example, I think recently I saw literally just the fuel pump on a Victorian lighthouse, right?
mhm.
So it's got this wrought iron lion head. It's a fuel pump. No one's going to see it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it could just be some simplest thing in the
It could
world,
literally
but
be a
now,
bar of metal. Right?
yeah, some artisan has gone through and they built this lion head, and all the rails are twisted
Yeah,
wrought
yeah.
iron, but every fifth one like does this weird thing. It's like some guy spent an incredible amount of time and money on this, and there's a lighthouse keeper is the only person on earth that's going to see it. And but yeah, it's like, yeah, if you're going to do it, make it beautiful. And I think that's cool, but I wouldn't have paid for that. That's expensive. My lighthouse is having the simplest rail system there is.
What if you get a 1920s operator in your cell phone while trying to make a call? Yeah, that would be very freaky. And let's see, Mia Geek said the recent Nancy Drew show was a good example of how modern Call of Cthulhu could work. I have not watched that one.
I haven't seen it. Now, shows that are very Call of Cthulhu, if you got a chance to see it, Netflix about a year or so ago did Archive 81, and I loved it. But it is a modern day story. It's based off a podcast, but like the podcast of the show went very different directions. So people are like, the podcast is about, it's like they're different. I love the show. Podcast I enjoyed for completely different reasons. But it is the only time I've ever seen found footage where it doesn't feel like a found footage story, where it's all shaky cams and all that, because it's a person who they restore old videotapes. That's like what they do professionally, is they take media and they digitize it stuff, and he gets these burned and smoke damaged like VHS tapes, and he's having to repair them, the footage, and digitize it. So he's going through this stuff from like the late 90s, and it's kind of leading to the mystery. And then whenever he's kind of watching it, then cut to what's going on. So you're following this girl who's videotaping all this stuff. But then at one point, it does like a flashback to the 20s when this cult was in full operation. But their cult, they don't do the chanting and all the culty stuff that you and I have used to. They do it's this weird breathing exercise that I've seen people like do in yoga, if they're all breathing in this weird pattern. And the fact that it wasn't chanting, but it's this group thing, was so unsettling because he had never seen it. But it's so simple, and but it's just creepy.
Yeah.
But then when they go to the 1920s, when the cult is doing their big thing, some of the stuff that I loved in it is, why is this person doing this? Why are they doing all these horrific things? She wants a child. She can't have a child. And modern medicine has failed her. It's not power. It's not to destroy the world. It's not to be evil for evil's sake. She wants a child, and she has not been able to have one. So she is turning to this other power, and this is what is causing this. And this other person wants this, and it's like it's really humanized them. But when they're doing their big ceremony of evil darkness, there's a jazz band because they're doing this party, and it's like because this comet's coming through, and they're all like dressed in the 1920s attire. They're doing their thing. There's a band playing. There's banners hanging from the ceiling. And then they're like, okay, let's go downstairs and summon the Dark Lord. And it's like, I have done my Call of Cthulhu cults wrong this entire time. This is way better.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking this one up. Usually, I harvest the SCP Foundation wiki for ideas for Call of Cthulhu, which are there's some pretty far out stuff out there, but this sounds really good.
I loved it. Some people were critical of it, but I thought it was fantastic, especially when they get to the 1920s thing. I'm like, I have absolutely not done 1920s cultist right at all. I was wrong this entire time. This is better than anything I could have done. And that was neat because you did have the limitations of technology of the 90s one versus it's totally modern and like how it's bleeding through. It's great.
Yep, definitely watching this one. Okay, so back before the stream started, we were talking, and you were saying that for some time when you were younger, you were definitely a strict D&D only player.
Yeah.
So what changed? How did that happen, and what changed in there?
Okay, so when I was younger, and so we played first edition when second edition had come out. So like you see there's Gygax's name on the cover, and I was kind of taught to say Gygax made D&D, by himself with his brilliance, sort of thing. And so I thought D&D was just the greatest thing there was, and it's kind of like with teams. It's like this is my team, this is my tribe. That's what it is. So whenever I saw like other games, I was like, they're a wannabe because they're not D&D. They suck because they're not D&D. That was the entire basis of that opinion, because I didn't look at them to know if they were any good. It was just, well, they're not what I play, so they've got to be bad, which is stupid. And the only exceptions that I had to that was science fiction, because D&D just couldn't do science fiction. They didn't have that. So like, we had a couple games we did like Star Frontiers for a couple sessions before we, the GM was doing that on the side. And then I always wanted to get into Mech Warrior. So I had like different things I wanted to do with Mech Warrior. And because that was sci-fi, D&D didn't do it. And like, I remember my friends would ask me like, hey, do you want to play this Earth Dawn game? I was like, oh, it's not D&D, it's crap. Why do I want to play that? Like, the worst D&D or death douchey guy ever that was made.
You had a high level of brand loyalty there. Yeah.
Oh God. And of course I was a high school kid, because high school kids are dumb. And I was a perfect example of how dumb it can be. And then like I remember I wasn't interested in like playing with guys like Star Wars game or any of that stuff. And then I discovered Cyberpunk 2020 when I was 18. I think it was a freshman in college at that time, and I thought it was brilliant, which was also sci-fi. So I started kind of doing a little bit of that on the side. So we had our D&D game that was our primary thing. Then we had Cyberpunk that was kind of like a secondary campaign going on, providing we still had enough time for our primary D&D game we're doing. Like, if weekends got tight, D&D. If we had plenty of weekends, we're doing D&D and Cyberpunk. And that kind of became my gateway, because that's a skill-based game. It works very different on every level. And and after a few years, I just started getting done with D&D. There was like my frustrations with the system, which is eventually those little things going to add up. And also I was just kind of getting done with fantasy. I was having frustration with the fact that the characters were getting like at these high levels. It was kind of really difficult to gauge what like was appropriate. Like I was like, I can throw this bad guy, and it's either going to curb stomp them, or it's going to be so easy it's not going to feel satisfying. And I had no way of gauging it.
It's still something that's not easy to gauge after 5 editions and stuff.
And that was back when we were still doing like our second edition hybrid thing. Because like third edition came out, I wasn't a fan of third edition, so we went back to for a second. And we ended up doing Cyberpunk as our primary, because I've been playing that for years. And once we flipped to the mentality of this is my primary game, and I really delved deeper into it, I realized that this answered all the problems that we had been facing for years. Of like, we'd try to do a D&D campaign. It was a fun campaign where we were traveling minstrels, and they were not heroes. And I told them, you are not heroes. You have the potential to be, but you're actually flat broke musicians. and you're broke.
That
And
sounds awesome.
like, and they had times they couldn't afford beer. I mean, it was this really immersive game, but there were this traveling group of performers. It was so much fun. But we had to house rules ways that they could get more non-weapon proficiencies in order to have more instruments and dancing and all the different, performing stuff they would do as they traveled this world. And when we started looking, I was like, can you imagine if we'd used this system for that minstrel game? This would have been amazing because it was, skill-based mechanics were totally different. We don't have the XP system that we're trying to do, where we're trying to justify like how do we give them XPs for the fact they had a really good night playing the violin, and or also the silliness of like I killed the Goblin King, so all of a sudden I know how to play the violin.
Yeah,
those goofy things,
that always gets me.
and I was like, oh yeah, I really really like this, and then I delved deeper and deeper into the interlock system for years, and then I was like, I'll try other games. So we actually played Call of Cthulhu converted to this, and we house ruled a system where we were using the cyberpunk core and playing 1920s Call of Cthulhu with it.
Oh, all right.
But it was also, and yes, I had to come up with like how sanity would work and all this stuff. But this is from not playing Call of Cthulhu. This is from I'm masterfully proficient in this one system. I'm going to try to apply it to everything, and I'm kind of shooting for it. So we did that for like a year. Then we did fantasy with it, and then fifth edition D&D came out, and a good friend of mine was singing its praises. He's like, "You got to try this. It fixes every problem there ever was." I'm like, "Okay, fine. I'll check this out." And I liked it. We played it for 1 year, and at that end of the year, we kind of agreed, at least most of us, but definitely me, that this system is neat. It's just not me. Like, because we had been doing skill-based games for so long at that point that it wasn't us anymore. And we we needed something else. And that was the same time 7th edition Call of Cthulhu released. And I got the PDFs because I was on all the mailing lists because I had to buy some Call of Cthulhu stuff from before that we were converting to this other thing. And I read Call of Cthulhu, and that was it. Like, oh wow, I found it. And but at that point, it was a lot easier for us to look into other games, and we started kind of stretching out. But for the longest time, I wouldn't do it because it's like, my game's the best for no other reason that my game's the best, and I have absolutely no evidence to the contrary. And or I don't want to convert this game because I know this game really well, so I'm going to try to apply this system to all these other games that it wasn't designed for and it is not the best at. So like, because we did medieval fantasy like D&D, but with a Call of Cthulhu system, it worked great in some ways, and there was an abysmal flaming failure in others because it's not what it was made for. So the fact that I'm kind of known as like somebody that plays a lot of games and has a lot of experience, that is, in the long run of my gaming experience, the newer development. I went through the entire gauntlet of every phase of the person that you're trying to get to play something new and they resist. I did it all. So I do find a lot of frustration when I'm trying to explain that people should try a different game, maybe one that's designed for it, or just try other stuff, man, see what's out there. Because the replies that I get are the exact same things I used to think and say. So my frustration that I have when I'm getting a lot of resistance, or I'm getting a lot of just stuff is like I can see myself for a few years before. Like, you dumbass. So I'm like mad at me in the past when I'm trying to talk to them of like this is why you should try this. It's like, oh yeah. So
in my case, I never had a trouble moving through different systems, but like I was saying earlier, it's like we didn't even have any stores that sold tabletop RPG books, so we played what we got. So I think we didn't have that many options, so anything goes.
and that's what a lot of them were, because if you didn't have access to it, but one person has the book for whatever game, that's what you play. Hopefully they had a book for a cool game. Um, statistically, it's probably going to be one of the popular ones, but it could have just been something random. And it's like, okay, we we play the Tank Girl RPG, and that's what he had. Uh, and what I thought was just like we were talking about the fact that a lot of it you had to like order from Great Britain and have it sent to you and all that. It's like that's so that's so limiting as far as being able to find just something on the shelf that's just sitting there. Like, oh, check that out. Like that's a very different dynamic than what I
Oh yeah, for
had.
sure.
At least when you're at least when you're buying it online, at least now with a lot of booksellers, like, hey,
You've
if you
got
like this,
reviews, you've
maybe
got pictures, and you've got suggestions, you've got review channels.
oh yeah, the ability to see what reviews are and what like people say about it, because used to you had the cover. That was it. It was 100% of your like, well, what's this game about? I don't know anybody that's ever played it. Let's see. And like, looks good. Like based off what? The fact that they paid a good artist for the cover and like but now you can go online and then you can see like what people think about it and stuff. So that's infinitely more. You're not making as blind of a decision as we used to have to do.
Let's see. Campaign terrain is saying so. GM, you see a dragon. Heroes, great. We kill it. What's it got?
Yeah, and that's man, we had a lot of fun doing that. But when I started discovering like investigative games and whatnot, it was like, man, I just don't get the joy out of like you see a dragon, well, we kill it. What's it got? As I used to. It doesn't do it for me the way it did. I had those memories. I had a great time, but I want other things now. So I don't hold it against anybody that that's what they want to game. That's all they want out of their game because I did that and I had a blast. But now the idea of getting to be on the Orient Express with Poirot and figured out who killed the bad guy, and there's some sort of ticking clock if something's lurking out in the snow or something. Like that's what gets me. Like that's the stuff that really gets me now because it's just a different type of fun.
Yeah, and it's like if the only problem is violence and the only solution is violence, it's like it gets kind of monotonous if it's always how do you solve the problem? Beat it up.
Well, yeah, and like the things like if the game's mostly focused for rewarding you for killing this monster or whatnot, then people are surprised that that's what people are focused on with the game. There is a channel called Dungeon Craft, Professor Dungeon Master, who did a really cool observation. He was able to nail something that I spent years trying to articulate. And he nailed what it was. Is he brought up how D&D has shifted over the years,
Yes.
and he compared the art. He's like, we're just talking about art. We're not going to talk about any text at all. And it was like, so he's going through like the monster manual, and you see like the monster of like the rot grubs, and there's this hero, and he's got these like worms crawling. He's looking at it horrified as these things are burrowing in his skin. And there's like the others were like, there's a dead character and the monsters perched above them, and they were threats. These are things that could hurt your character. They were in peril, and are you going to survive this horrible thing? It's like, okay, now it's like a 5th edition art, and it was always them kicking the monster's ass. Like they weren't in peril. It was like, here is a bad thing and you get to beat it up. Well, in the earlier editions, like here's a bad thing, and if you aren't safe and if you aren't lucky, it will kill you. And it's like that was the lesson that those two games presented in their art of what to expect from the game. And like when he articulated that, it was like, oh my god, that's what it was, because I couldn't tell you, but it was like there's just something about it that wasn't there before. Like it's not right, but I can't put my finger on it. And when he showed those pictures and talked about it, I was like, yeah, because the game is about beating things up at the end of the day. That's what it is.
Yeah, same thing. I couldn't quite. I could tell that there was a difference in feel between second edition Ravenloft and fifth edition or fourth edition. The light bulb moment came when I watched the same video.
And it's one of those things where it's like it's just that was the play style at the time was more like, can you survive? That's a cool type of play. But there's also like kick its ass. That's also a cool type of play. It's like I'm not
There's
saying that one
different
is
games. Yeah.
I'm not saying one's better, but what I what my experience was when I thought D&D was it was the characters in peril. And then when I did pick up the newest edition, and it didn't play like that. And it was like, what's going on? Because it's like it's the same game, and but that focus of what it tried to draw you to had shifted over the multiple companies and many years and many hands it had been through. There had been a change, and but I hadn't figured out at that level yet. So then Professor Dungeon Master pointed it out, and I was like, "Oh my god, okay, yeah, it's so obvious now."
Yeah, Dungeon Craft is another great channel. I really enjoy the Professor's videos.
I once very nearly texted him for Father's Day because his name is Dan, and it's
Oh.
in my phone. It's next to Dad, and I was halfway through the text before I realized I was about to send that to Professor DM. Of like, Happy Father's Day, Dad. Like, yeah, love you. It's like, and then when I realized what I was about to do, I very nearly just went through with it, but I didn't.
He would have been very surprised, I think.
Yeah. So it'd have been a weird embarrassment, but I at least looked down long enough to be like, whoop, wait, wrong. At the time, I was like, oh, that's my dad. Let me go to my dad. Okay, let me text him after Father's Day. And afterwards, I was like, I should have just gone through with it. The text to my dad.
Yeah, I had the chance to talk to him, to interview him once on this channel as well. He's a really sweet guy.
Let us stop to fanboy over Professor DM. So
Okay.
he is exactly the guy that he presents himself on the show. He's very sincere. He's very nice. He's funny. I enjoyed him immensely, and I really was happy to see that he was exactly what I hoped he was. Like the way he presents himself, that is exactly who he is. And so I really like him. We don't always agree on everything. That's cool, but I really dig him personally. So
Yeah, the thing is that even if you don't agree with something he says, or I don't agree with something he says, he always has a reasoned argument, which not many
yeah,
people do. It's not just like, oh, this thing is bad.
yeah. And as I said, he's just a good guy. I like him. He's very funny.
Okay, question from Dungeon Matron. I wonder if Seth would enjoy 10 candles.
I have been told I should check it out. I have not checked it out. So I've been told I know a little bit about it. I know it's a game you're not supposed to know too much about. So I'll pick it up eventually. It's just I haven't bothered picking it up and looking at it, and that's it. What I know about it sounds really cool. So,
Yeah, all I
but
know about it,
it's also a one shot game,
I
and
think
those are
so, yeah.
sometimes a lot harder. Like there's another one shot horror RPG that I love getting to play. Is the most beautiful games ever. It's called Bluebeard's Bride, and
Okay.
it is so weird where it follows the Bluebeard's Bride fable of the bride and the
Don't open the
house, and she's
door.
got the keys.
All right.
Yeah, and the player characters are all playing different aspects of the bride.
Oh, okay.
So they're not separate characters. They're actually all playing the same. But like, who gets to pilot? Is like this is the maiden, and this is the crone, and this is the things like that. It's their personalities aspects inside this one character that they're piloting. But it can only be done as a one shot game, and you can do it different ways, but there's no sequels to it. As far as like you can't keep going with this character. It's really cool, but you actually have to have a group of people that are up for that type of experience to a different game, this
yeah.
situation, and it's magical. but it's kind of hard for me to schedule a game if okay, guys, we're actually going to have a really dark, almost like just this is a game that's going to leave you sad. We're going to play it once. Um, but I did see I'd heard about it. I actually saw the book in my game shop that I went to, and it's so beautiful because they did like the gold foils, and there's like the mats with the glossies, and
Oh,
like
okay.
the black and white with the blue, and the fit and finish on the book is absolutely gorgeous. I bought it because I heard about it and I wanted to check it out, and I saw it on the shelf, and I was like, well, that book is too damn pretty not to go home with. So I bought the book because it's just that damn pretty. And then I finally got to play it when I went to Gen Con a couple years ago. And one of my good friends, who's one of my players, we went to it, and that's when like during the break, he kind of looked at me. He was like, "Oh God!" Like he was very like, "This is really like I was expecting this type of experience. Like, yeah, this is what I was wanting. This is great." But yeah, it's so 10 Candles is like this. It's supposed to be very emotionally taxing and kind of leave a sense of just sadness when it's, and you play it once, but you have to have a group of people that are in that mindset of this is what we're going to do to have fun.
Mm.
And you could really only have one first game of this. So you want it to be perfect because like you can only play your first game of Bluebird's Bride once. So it's like, man, and I read it. I'm like, I can't GM this. I have to see this GM'd, and I don't want to watch somebody play it. I want to play this. So we had to wait to a Gen Con, and I ended up with a fantastic GM. It was an amazing game. Uh, but Ten Candles, from what I read, looks like okay. I got one shot to give you guys a memorable and amazing first session of this because it's not something that you can like keep playing over and over again and get remotely the same experience out of.
No, I imagine not. Regarding the mechanic in Bluebeard's Bride, where everyone takes kind of disrespect, that's the only thing. The only other game I've seen that in is Solomon Kane, the board game where you never play the character. You just every player plays one of the virtues, and you just try to nudge him along in some way.
And it's kind of like that. Each character has like like instead of hit points, they've got these kind of aspects of personality. Sometimes you have to lose them to get through. So the
Mm.
players, their characters can die, but it's this aspect of the character that is lost. And there's like this weird thing that all the others recite to mourn the loss of their sister aspect of it. It's a weird game.
Yeah, it does sound
It's
weird.
really cool. Just it's gorgeous. Jeez, I'm like sitting here like looking at it across the room. I was like, I want to like get up and go grab it. I was like, look at this, it's beautiful.
So speaking of showing things off, we've got some pictures in the community showcase in Discord for miniatures and terrain that viewers have submitted. Would you like to have a look at them?
Okay, okay.
Okay, let's see. You should be able to see them on Zoom. There we go.
Okay, hold on. Let me bring the picture up. I actually had it really minimized because is that a little miniature booth?
Yep, it is.
Oh wow.
Okay, this one is by Earthman Brick.
Checkerboarded the floor. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, even the damage on the walls and stuff.
That is great. That is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I think this is for his post-apocalyptic set. I like the I think that's the kind of 70s or 80s tables, the ones with the plastic covering, which always chips off in the at the edges.
In college, there was this pizza joint that was near where I lived. It was like the one that all the kids, all the students went to that had those types of tables, but it had been like the local hangout for so long that table was so marred, that clear plastic coating with like the initials of students over like I think 30 something years. Like occasionally like people would have been sitting there because like holding a lighter up to the edge and they actually have burned just different arcs down. It was the seediest diabetes place. I loved it so damn much, and I mourned when it was gone. But they had those tables, and it's like, yeah, it looks like the tomatoes, the flying tomatoes tables.
Okay, we have another one from Earthman Brick later, so but we'll get to that. So this one is from Little C. Nearing completion of my latest cardboard trash build made from recycled Amazon boxes and off-cut straps from various projects. Woohoo!
The player that I was talking about earlier, it was like the kid in my scout troop that like quickly became my best friend because his dad was a dungeon master. He used to do these amazing buildings out of just like cardboard stuff that he found. This is also the 90s. Like he was just figured out how to do it. He didn't have like there was nowhere to get advice on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he now owns a game shop that does like the war games where he builds the trains. And like he is like grown from this 12-year-old kid, like hot gluing cardboard together and like wrapping it to make like little fantasy towns and stuff to like he now owns a business doing that. So I think
Nice.
so, but that actually really reminds me of one of the builds that he did when he was like 12 or 13 years old of let's just grab some cardboard boxes and make ourselves some scenery. So sorry, that's just where my mind went.
Do you use a lot of terrain? Because I know you use miniatures, but I don't think you've ever mentioned actually having terrain stuff and things like that.
No, I love terrain. I love when I see like the cool terrains, like some of those games have when you go to like the big events where they've got like the huge boards set up with terrain. It's like it's amazing. I love it. I used to love doing model trains when I was younger, and so I find that stuff fascinating. Some of the stuff that people do, but the big reasons that I don't do it is one, I it's like I'm going to put a lot of work into it to use it once. I'm going to have to keep coming up with reasons to use the same thing, and two is just space. Like I would have to have like a 40-foot container in my backyard just to hold all of the stuff that it would be because the training would own me. So I never got into it, partially for my own survival, because it would just fill my house. Because so many of the ones that I've seen are like, oh my god, I love that, I want it so bad. It's like, what would I do with it after that one game or whatnot? Like and I also know my players. Like if I spent so much time building the grand cathedral that's like, you know, the roof is caved in, it's got the stone arches and it's got the right amount of decay and all that. It's like, and then they're gonna be like, hey, what's next to it? Like, you sons of bitches. I spent the past like 3 weeks in this cathedral. No, you are not going across the street. Go to the cathedral. So like,
yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but but however, the storage space is definitely a common problem. So I think we'll see a more complete version of this one later. Okay, this one's from Earthman's.
It's got a jukebox now.
It's a jukebox now.
But the little grill for the spot's great. That is fantastic. The only problem when you're looking at these is you don't have a sense of scale of how actually tiny that really is.
True.
Because it's one of the things I always hate whenever I take like a picture of my mini, is you see just how bad I am of a painter, but it's like the whole thing is really only this big. When you look at a person, like, that looks amazing because it's small. So when you're looking at these, you don't like have a sense of like how small that really is to really appreciate how amazing that is.
That's a good point because I'm seeing it on my screen right now, and it's about possibly twice the size it would be in real life.
Easily. Yeah. So we see every part where the line isn't perfectly straight, but if you're looking at that in person, it's like, I bet that looks 1,000 times better. Would you could really see how small it is?
I'm just realizing that
how much detail that is. Oh yeah.
I'm just realizing that the tiles are individual panels. It's not painted on the individual tiles.
It's great.
Okay, oh, here we go. This is the completed church thingy.
See the cars there.
Mm-hmm.
Just cool. Like, I love this type of stuff. Yeah, like I need to have like some sort of like like airplane hangar set up so we could all play and we can all walk around the table. I've got enough room for everything.
Okay, Little C is also another great Call of Cthulhu player.
You get to the religious compound and you pull the sheet off the table and it's all laid out there. It's like, oh my God, it'd be wonderful.
Yeah, but then you have to put it away eventually.
Yeah, and then it's like, what do I do with it?
Okay, so great work, Lucy. And okay, Lawrence from Dirty Basement Terrain has some hex terrain made 12 years ago. And I think that's some MechWarrior miniatures on top of there.
Yeah, the nice hex elevation stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, these are super useful. And this is the kind of stuff you can use over and over again.
Oh yeah, because there's always reconfigure it in a different way and stack it all up in a big tub to carry it around in. Some of the wargaming setups that you'll see at like the larger cons are just so breathtaking
Oh yeah, I know.
of what they do. And I remember, I think it was at Origins last year. There was this giant spaceship that had crashed into a mountain where there was some fortified. They built the whole thing. It's gorgeous. And like, oh yeah, we had the spaceship from last year, and we wanted to come up with something new. So we then like built a whole thing where the same ship crashed, and we modified the ship to be ripped open and all this because they spent so much time on it. They wanted to use it a second time. And like,
Yeah,
what do you
I
do
can
with it?
understand that.
So they smashed it the side. So now everybody's fighting around it and have to go through the floors. The floors sideways. There's base and stuff. Oh, it's amazing. But it's like, it was enormous. It was absolutely huge. But it was this just stellar work of art. And everybody looked and say, my God, I want to play on that field. Like that is oh my God, it's amazing. It's like, yeah, it just takes up so much physical room. And then I'm looking at it thinking the logistics like, how hard was that to get here? Like how far did you travel? And then you had to like
Yeah, that's a good
like
point. Yeah.
like, how much all this weigh? How small are you able to break it down? Like, well, we've done this for a while. We know how to like build it in pieces that can be broken down really quickly. I was like, I see, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have just been screwed. And so yeah, but then you're there like, you have to rent a truck to get all this stuff here, and like, where are you coming from? Like, oh, I love what they do. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and I mean, look, wargaming table with miniatures, and it just pushes the big red button in my head that says "Play with toys."
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Okay, now this one's a bit suspicious because it's a plan for something Questborn is trying to build, and yeah, it's very unusual for Questborn to make plans.
So is it being lifted up? And like, I'm not sure what exactly that is.
I have no idea. So maybe Kim, if you could shed some light on this. But yeah, pretty sure it's going to be terrifying when it's done.
So it looks like
Fields maybe and stones possibly.
was that stairs? Because like my first thought is like, it looks like fields, but
Huh. It's a mystery. Okay, now these are definitely floorboards with
yeah.
stairs.
But the circular things, I don't know if those are embedded in the floor or they're to represent something that is standing there.
Aha, it's a layer for the upcoming one-shot challenge. So I think she's not going to tell us just yet. Because we have this challenge going on till December where we're designing one-shot dungeons, basically. So this
Okay.
is it. So yeah, wonder what that will be.
It'll be revealed
It will
later.
be revealed when the stars are right. Okay, and I showed these before, but I think they're relevant. Uh-huh. Okay, so okay,
Yeah.
this one was from the Halloween challenge where for reasons best left unexplained, we decided to have a challenge where people build things with baby doll heads. So you can
I
see the
approve.
noses and the lips over there. All right, and okay, this was part of a dungeon master screen.
Oh, well, that is awesome.
Okay, the way that Kim had made it was like this large leather panel, and then ribbed to show these little scenes. And this is a tiny creature made out of a doll's eyeball.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love it.
Okay. Oh yeah, I loved it. This is something that this was Dungeon Matrix entry for the Baby Doll Head Challenge. Oops. Just going to have to silence that, otherwise YouTube will be unhappy.
Oh wow. Is this something that the characters would find that you give to your players? Because it's great. Like, what is it?
I'm not sure what how she planned to use it, but it's definitely a great prop. And
No, no, it's badass. It's like, so what do you do with this? Tell
okay,
me more.
Lisa, what are diabolical plans for this? Ah, okay. Kim was saying about the diagram. The circles are cages. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so well done everyone for the entries. Those were looking really good. Oh, that would be really good. Earth Big is suggesting that Dungeon Matron's prop could be painted monochromatic, like in H.R. Geiger style. That would be really interesting. Okay, so Seth, I seem to have monopolized your time for over 2 hours, so maybe you should think about wrapping it up soon. But
Okay.
before we go, do you have any if you had to give someone the this is the most important thing I think you should know about role playing, whether it's game mastering or playing, what would it be?
Um, the most important thing is that don't forget to have fun. I think a lot of us, and I've been guilty of this many times over the years, get really stressed out if certain things have to meet a certain standard, or we're not going to be happy. Whether that be as a player, if we don't get this, I'm big miserable, or if as a GM, like, oh, I get this, it's gonna ruin my time. That we get so focused on that as our objective that we forget about the actual objective, which is that we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna have some great memories, and we're gonna laugh with our friends, and we're just going to forget about all the horrors of the real world for a bit, and just have some stupidity in our imaginations. And we get so caught up in some other objective that we forget the primary one. And that also comes with like being able to run the perfect game. Don't be afraid to suck. If it's so what if you don't know the game perfectly well, go ahead and run it, and you'll learn. But people will think that it has to be perfect. They have to absolutely know everything before they can ever run it. That they never ever get around to running it, and they never have fun. So fun, don't forget to do it. It's the actual reason we're all here. And don't get caught up in the details. Don't let that get in the way. So that would be my biggest one. If just do it and have fun. And after that, everything else is secondary, and that can enhance the fun. But that is the point. Don't forget to have fun.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks again for joining us, Seth. This was a fantastic talk.
This is
So
fun.
I'm going to leave your website in the chat so that if anyone wants to read more about your books or your stuff, they can find it there. And definitely,
Okay.
definitely go to his channel if you haven't already, because this stuff on there is awesome. So, thanks everyone for joining us. Seth, thanks again for this talk, and have a great week, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.